Congress has approved a new budget for NASA, rejecting deeper cuts that had been proposed and setting funding levels for the year ahead. The decision could have major implication for the agency's future and for Houston's Johnson Space Center. To help us break it all down, we're joined by Andrea Leinfelder, space reporter for the Houston Chronicle. Andrea, welcome to Hello Houston.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Sure. And if you would like to join the conversation, if you have a comment or question for Andrea, give us a call, 713-440-8870.
So from looking at what we know now, what does this budget mean about the way they are seeing NASA up at the federal level?
Yeah, so NASA has a lot of bipartisan support, and this is just Congress saying we like NASA running how it's currently running. And so at the start of last year, President Trump came in. He put out this budget request that it was looking to drop NASA's budget by 24%. And most of that drop was going to be like a 47% cut to the science budget. And so Congress was very quick to say, we don't want those types of cuts at NASA. And so they've been over the past year working on their version. And then now we have a new budget that's only 2% less than the current budget, but there's now two buckets of money. So when you consider the money that came in from the big, beautiful bill, which gave NASA $10 billion over the next 6 years, those two together actually give the agency the largest annual budget it's had in nearly 3 decades.
Wow. So what does that tell you about where they want us to be going? Is it like saying, you know what, we're interested in that moon project, we're interested in getting to Mars, or is it about other things?
Yeah, the budget it's really big and over, all encompassing. So there's a bunch of different topics in there. But one thing that is interesting is when Trump requested the budget, he really focused on Mars. And a big push was on sending humans to Mars. A lot of that has been walked back in the past few months. And everyone seems to be on the same page of going to the moon first. This budget and the One Big Beautiful Bill actually really protects a lot of the moon programs because Congress wants to make sure that NASA goes to the moon and that America beats China to the moon because there is a second space race going on.
So what's your latest on moving a shuttle down to Johnson Space Center? Because we were talking about that a month ago, and it was all about John Cornyn and Ted Cruz wanting to move this shuttle and with millions of dollars to do it into NASA here in town. So where's the latest on that? And why are you laughing?
Still a lot because this is the story that has continued on for a year now. There are still a lot of questions surrounding moving a space shuttle to Houston. I'm not sure yet if a shuttle is coming. I know a space vehicle will come, but it's to be determined if it's a shuttle. The law says a space vehicle has to come to Houston that has flown astronauts, right? So Houston's going to get something, but the shuttle's really hard to move. The first time it was moved, it had special planes to fly it. It had all sorts of equipment that just doesn't exist anymore. So getting it on a ship, getting it all the way around the coast of Florida and the Gulf of Mexico, right? Like that's just going to be a very big undertaking. And so there's still a lot of back and forth in Congress and with just the public interest in that. And now we have a new NASA administrator who's basically said, we'll have to see if we can do it with the money given to us by Congress. If not, there could be a different space vehicle. So there's a lot, I think, going on behind the scenes that we don't see that's really got to come to light before we realize what we're getting here in Houston.
Well, bringing us a little closer to a story we have been talking about, Artemis, and what's going on right now with these, what's called, not dress rehearsals, what were they calling them? The wet launch? What was that?
Wet dress. It's a wet dress rehearsal.
Wet dress.
Yes.
Okay, I combined the two and we get to where we were going.
Yeah, so the moon rocket, the Space Launch System rocket and the Orion capsule, they're at the launch pad. So, Florida, it took like 12 hours, slowly crawled this thing to the launch pad. And they're doing a bunch of preparations for this wet dress rehearsal. The wet dress rehearsal, they're going to practice loading the rocket with propellant, and they're going to practice a countdown all the way to right before the engines would ignite. And so this is like the last big step before NASA is ready to launch this and ready to send astronauts, out of Earth's orbit for the first time in more than 50 years. But a lot has to go right with this test before they can launch astronauts. And the test right now, it's no later than February 2nd is what they're planning. And then the launch window opens February 6th and continues, I think, through the 11th, maybe the 12th. But it's a very short window. So this test has to go right. And last time they tried to launch this rocket, they did this test multiple times. So we don't know yet if they're going to be able to make the February window because NASA won't say until after this test. And this test is going to be kind of a photo finish for a lot of people.
Yeah, a part that fascinates me about this, and I keep hearing, we've talked about this before on the show, is it's the first time we've gone back into space in 50 years, basically. I'm curious, the experience for the astronauts, how different is their experience going to be this time than it was 50 years ago? Or are we still kind of doing this rather elementary?
I think NASA has learned a lot from the International Space Station how to keep people healthy in space. And so there's going to be a lot more amenities. I think the food will be a little better. It's not going to be great, but it'll be a little better, right? I think exercise, they know the importance of that now. And so they have each crew member has to exercise 30 times a day. I think a lot has been learned from it. But it's interesting. I like to think of it compared to the space station because most of these astronauts, 3 of them have been to the space station. And that's like the inside's like the size of a football field. It's big. If you need to get away by yourself for a minute, you can. This capsule is like 315 cubic feet. It's tiny. And all 4 people are going to be there for 10 days. And so when I think about this mission, a lot of times I think about how cramped that's going to be for them.
We are speaking with Andrea Leinfelder, space reporter for the Houston Chronicle. Andrea, why do you think it's important for people to know that Congress has approved a new budget for NASA?
Yeah, I think, I think it's important that people know that Congress still views NASA with a bipartisan light, right? Both Democrats and Republicans came together to give NASA a budget to pretty much maintain the budget that it had. It's 2% lower than it was. But if you add the one big, beautiful bill, it's more money. But still, basically, they came together and they decided that NASA was something they want to continue spending on. It's important. It's important for STEM education down here. It's important to keep America, relatives in science, technology, engineering, math. But it's also important in this effort to go back to the moon and to continue deeper into space. And so I think Congress really supported that with the budget they approved.
I want to get back to the Artemis mission. So it's going to launch maybe February 6th or shortly thereafter. And it's going to go and just orbit the moon over and over. How many times can you orbit the moon in 10 days? That seems really boring. What are they doing up there?
Yeah, they're actually not going to really orbit the moon. So they're going to go up. First, they're going to orbit Earth so they can check out the system because this is the first time the life support systems have been flown. So they need to make sure, okay, it's providing air, it's scrubbing carbon dioxide. Does the bathroom work? Does the kitchen work, right? None of that's been tested on this spacecraft. So they're going to lap the Earth for a day. And if that goes well, they're going to do this free return trajectory to the moon. So it's going to use the Earth and the moon's gravity so that once it starts going to the moon, no matter what, it'll come back. So ultimately, it's going to be like a figure 8 of the moon. And they're only going to get at closest approach 3-ish hours to really focus on observing the moon. So they're not going to spend days circling the moon. It's just kind of a there and back. It's buying down risk for the next mission. So NASA likes to take small steps to buy down some risk. So this one's the first time people have launched in a spacecraft. It'll be the first time people have been near the moon in more than 50 years, but they're not going to land. That's going to be the Artemis III mission. So this is just to show that this spacecraft can keep people healthy and safe in space and then, bring them home.
Is there any chance it can't? That the spacecraft would fail this mission?
No, I don't think so. Obviously, space is hard, rocket science is hard, but NASA has done so much testing on the ground, they won't launch it if they're not confident. And then it's going to be in Earth's orbit. So there's even more time for checkouts to make sure everything's working before they go to the moon. Now, once they do go to the moon, of course, something can happen, but the trajectory they're on means as soon as they do that big engine burn to go to the moon, no matter what, they'll be brought home. And so any type of engine failure situations, no matter what, they'll come back home. And so that's really why they chose that trajectory. But NASA is very thorough. We talked about the Apollo program. We're much less risk tolerant these days. We're more risk adverse. So I think NASA would not be launching this spacecraft if they did not think they could bring home the crew.
It's a pretty heroic mission. I mean, those fellows that are going to, what is the crew? Is it men and women on this 4-person crew?
Yeah, we have 3 NASA astronauts and 1 Canadian Space Agency astronaut. So from NASA, there is Reed Wiseman. He's a commander. We have Victor Glover. He's going to be the first Black man around the moon. And then we have Christina Hammock-Cook, and she's going to be the first woman around the moon. And then from Canada, we have Jeremy Hansen, first Canadian around the moon. So it's a very, diverse, inclusive mission with international partners and with a bunch of different people to show NASA going back to the moon.
I don't mean to be getting ahead of where we're at right now, but when they do get to the moon this time in this whole ramp up, how different will that experience look to us than the last time we saw folks on the moon?
It's hard to say how different the first few missions will look. We don't know the crew yet, so we don't know the makeup of the crew. And initially it'll be like land and come home pretty quickly. The big part here, though, is that nobody wants this to be a repeat of Apollo where NASA just goes, plants a flag, does the boot steps, and then leaves for another 50 years. So they're really looking at making the sustainable presence where people can live and work on the moon, in the moon's orbit for long periods of time, and then go on to Mars. So initially, I think the missions will be kind of similar, just quick back and forth, but they're building, rovers. They're building, ideally, they want to build a space station to orbit the moon. They want to build moon habitat. So the long-term plan is to really create a place where we can learn how to live and work on another planet before going on to Mars, because should something go wrong, it's a lot easier to get home from the moon than Mars.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I'm still fascinated by 10 days of this, because when they launch Artemis III to go to the moon, it will be a much shorter trip, I'm assuming, than 10 days. It's not going to take 10 days to get to the moon.
No, I mean, the 10-day mission is the whole thing, there and back. So I don't know how long Artemis III will be off the top of my head, but, if you take out the time spent orbiting the Earth, it's still 3-ish days there and back. So I'm not really sure how long that mission will be. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, will it go? I mean, I remember the first flights that went to the moon and landed on the moon, but I mean, you had the rocket that took them, but then you had another device that went to the moon. So will it be that same setup with Artemis III? Where one gets in
and
there?
that's where it gets interesting with Artemis III, because instead of with Apollo, NASA built its own lunar lander. This time, NASA is partnering with commercial companies that are building the lunar lander. And so SpaceX has been designing the Starship rocket, and that is supposed to be what lowers, astronauts to the moon. But that rocket's been, tested in South Texas, and it's not quite advancing as quickly as people would like, right? It has not been orbit yet. They haven't learned how to recover fully the spacecraft yet. So it's just been a lot of testing and a lot of development that needs to go before Starship's ready to fly humans. And that led for the NASA administrator to actually reopen the competition. And so now Blue Origin is also back, and they're trying to build a lander. So we've got two commercial companies, racing to build this lander that can lower astronauts to the moon. But both of them have a lot to do still before they're ready to carry humans.
Before we let you go, I'm just curious, because I grew up in a time when people were fascinated by space. I'm curious, what bit you about space? What made this something you wanted to cover, and what fascinates you about all of these stories?
Yeah, I grew up in Orlando, Florida, and so you could watch the space shuttle take off from my front yard. You could see it when it climbed up above the trees. So I've always really enjoyed space. Once I started becoming a reporter, I got to write a couple of these stories before I got the full-time beat. And I love the passion and the enthusiasm of people who work in space. It's a really fun topic to cover, right? I get paid to geek out, and I get to talk to people who love their jobs. And so it's just a really fun beat for me.
Andrea Leinfelder is the space reporter for the Houston Chronicle. Andrea, thanks for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.